Hi everybody, it's Russ from My Hammers 11. I hope you're all safe and well. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing and hitting the bell notification so you're notified of any time we put new content on. We have videos going up daily. Sometimes you lucky buggers, you get 2 a day as well. And we've got loads of good guests coming up, including today's guest. Broadcaster, there's a long list. Broadcaster, journalist, author, podcaster. It's Sam Delaney. Hi Sam, how are you?
I'm very well. Thanks for having me. I'm delighted to be here chatting to you.
Yeah, no, I should have put finally and Hammer, obviously, and massive
Hammer,
hammers.
of course,
More importantly,
above everything else.
Exactly. So, how are you? How are you coping? How's that? That's the first thing everyone says nowadays.
Yeah, well, I'm coping very well. I'm wearing shorts every day and t-shirt, and I shave sporadically, and I'm in my Adidas slides every day. I mean, the slob kind of lockdown lifestyle is all for me. I mean,
me
if I get, I suppose at the beginning you had a bit of anxiety about the situation. Now the anxiety I feel is about lockdown being lifted.
Me too.
Me too. To get back to a normal, civilized, structured lifestyle. I find that really terrifying because it's been a long time and I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
It's awful to say. I know it's been hell for people, and I'm lucky that myself and most of my family have all kept in good health, right? So I understand that I'm lucky, but you know, I've enjoyed myself.
Yeah, no, me too. I'm not
caught up on a load of admin.
Exactly. What I like is I like not having a pressure when it comes to weekends.
Yes,
so it's like, you know, with my wife and my daughter, before, what should we do this weekend? Let's go to Lakeside. Let's do this. Let's go to London.
No,
you can do fuck all. Sorry, we can just.
I think I'm going to sit around on my ass.
I can sit around and I might put the pool out.
Do strange things like I'm gonna watch the whole official FIFA film of the 1998 World Cup. I'll do something like I've been watching loads of stuff like that, just ticking stuff off the list. Do you know what I mean? I watched A View to a Kill on Saturday in the middle of the day with my son. You've never seen it before, you know, and it was just like, this is not the sort of thing that you usually find the time to do, watching A View to a Kill. But I'm glad I did it.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it's nice to sort of educate the younger generation on some of the stuff it's having time. And it's like, my daughter, I've got her into the Back to the Future movies. It's like, she's like 8. And so it's like, this was like, when I was your age, this was like epic.
Yeah.
It's like,
she's
like, oh, okay. But yeah,
really, it makes you really angry if they don't love it as much as you do, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I become furious. Like my kids aren't that into Back to the Future or Indiana Jones. And I'm like, who are you? Like,
are you sure you're right?
What is the matter with you? Were you born without a soul?
Well, that's the thing, and actually, in a weird way, in a weird sort of segue way, so to speak, this sort of whole project I've been running is sort of because I'm learning a lot more of the history that I wasn't involved in. So obviously with West Ham, obviously I know from I started early 90s was when I first went, and that's my reference point. But talking to people and players and older fans we have on the channel as well, you're learning a lot more about players that you never really knew much about. You obviously know the what's the word? The sort of legends and the stories, but that sort of one-to-one interaction, little sort of, I met him and he was at my school and he did this and he had a soccer school and I went and took that's lovely. It's really, really nice. And that's what we're doing with this channel. So it is sort of interviewing loads of different people, all different ages, all West Ham fans. It's the only thing that connects everyone.
Yeah.
Whether they're well known or someone that emailed me the other day, I'm a nobody. Can I come on the channel? You're not a nobody. No one probably knows you. You're West Ham. That's all. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what happens.
My kids said something really interesting to me the other day. Well, it was interesting to me. It probably will be to you. But I was driving along with them, and my daughter's 12. She's been coming to West Ham since she was about 4 or something. Yeah. And my son, who is mega into West Ham. In fact, I don't think he's taken off his West Ham dressing gown for the whole of lockdown. My missus has to. He goes to sleep in it too, and she has to sneak it off him while he's asleep to get it washed and dried, because he's so addicted to it. Anyway, they were talking about other clubs. I think they were talking about my elder brother is a Spurs fan, unfortunately, and they were talking. They said the other day, but I mean Spurs. It's not the same, is it, as being a West Ham fan? I mean, being a West Ham fan is like. You're part of a big family. And I said, do you think so? And they said, well, if you see another West Ham fan in the street, you're so excited. And you always say, because I've always done this since I was a kid, and it used to embarrass them. Okay, and you always say, "Come on, you Irons," when you walk past them, and they always smile and look really happy and say it back. And I said, "Yeah, exactly. It's a thrill. It's a great thing." And she went, "I don't think fans of other clubs do that." No. And I said, "No, they don't. I mean, they might do.
They might do, but we don't care."
I still think
true.
It's
so true. And I've got this newfound respect for the foreign-based fans as well, because obviously a lot of my friends I know who are foreign-based Hammers, so to speak, they were born in Essex and London. They moved out. Where I'm talking to guys like the Scandinavian Hammers, and, you know, there's no real reference point why they should support West Ham, like, geographically. But, like, Yemen Holt is, like, an absolute fanatic. And, and I moan getting a rail replacement bus from Gideon Park, you know, whatever, or having to drive to Newbury Park to get to Stratford. He gets on a fucking flight to Oslo, and, you know, and honestly, it's absolutely. And my appreciation of the fan base has just, like, grown massively into this sort of community, and that's how this is spawned. You know, you know, I might chat to Phil. Phil said I'll get Sam on, and you know, and it's just.
I know. I'm already thinking of a list of names to give you once this is done, mate. Brilliant. So brace yourself.
No, I love it. Basically, I want to hit 500 eventually. It's going to take a few years, but 500.
Wow, yeah.
Because that matches a survey that the club did back in 2003, asking about fans' dream 11. But I've changed the criteria slightly to make it more inclusive of people. For you, Sam, what was your because obviously West Ham fan, you know, fanatic. What was your earliest West Ham memory?
Well, I do have very vague memories of the 1980 Cup final when I would have only been 5. But in those days, everyone used to go to my grandma's house to watch the Cup final. In the days when Cup final was like Christmas Day, and you know, the families got together. And I remember being at my grandma's house, and a lot of my uncles there would have been Spurs fans. There weren't any West Ham fans in my family other than my older brother. And to be honest, I've got 3 brothers. They're all older than me, and they all support different clubs. And the middle one supports West Ham, and he had a big influence on me supporting them. But really, it was my best mate where I grew up was a West Ham fan, and his dad was a big West Ham fan, used to take us, and that's what really got me hooked. And around that time, when I was living a few doors down from this kid Alex Jones, who was my best mate, and him and his dad my dad, I didn't live with my dad, so I didn't have a dad at home telling me to support, but I spent a lot of time with this other family, and they got me into the idea of West Ham. And then in the middle of it, West Ham winning the Cup final, and I'm sort of cheering them on. And I've got uncles and people all taking the mickey out of me, doing all that, West Ham, what do you want West Ham for? And all that. Like, I don't, you know, suppose they thought it was a joke or something. So that's a bit of it. But then I also have that's very vague. A more vivid memory was when I was I suppose I would have been about 8. And I remember hearing on the radio Tony Cottee scoring a goal against Tottenham on his debut. And I remember just being captivated by the idea of this kid, because it was so like reading Roy the Rovers. The idea that kid, I think he was only 17. And the idea of a kid coming out of the youth team and scoring on his debut against your big rivals. I kind of got that, and it sort of played to the narratives of football that I'd picked up from reading things like Roy the Rovers, that we had this kid who had, you know, it's this blonde-haired kid. He kind of looked sort of quite like a comic book hero. And I remember hearing that on the radio, and my West Ham fan brother Don would have had it on the radio and had explained it to me and was going mad that we'd won. And that's a real vivid sort of memory of the kind of whole romance and excitement of loving a football club really kind of hitting me then.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that's not a bad one to have, is it?
Yeah.
And that's what's lovely about it, because you're hearing some people like, it's those memories, not necessarily, oh, my first game was against... No, it's not that. It's that, and that's what hooks you on. That's lovely.
Yeah, like a story. It's often a story around the club, isn't it? That gets you into it. And that was one of the things that really hooked me in deep. Yeah. Yeah,
that's brilliant. And since sort of like the early 80s onwards, there's, you know, 30, 40 years, something like that now. What sort of, obviously you have many troughs and a few peaks. What would you say would be sort of your fondest memories since then? You know, sort of like...
Well, in obviously the famous 85-86 season was when I had a group of mates, and we were all actually from West London. But at my primary school in West London, there was a little gang about most people in those days. There was a lot of people who supported Spurs because even though it was West London, it was the era that Spurs had Glenn Hoddle and had been to the cup final a couple of times and stuff like that. And other than that, there was a lot of Liverpool and Everton in that era. But there was a small group of us who supported West Ham, and I still can't really work out why. I think it was this kid, Alex Jones. His dad was from the East End, was from Bethnal Green, and he was massive into them. And he was an impressive bloke. He was a sort of we lived on this estate in Brentford in West London, and he was sort of like an alpha male figure, right? He was a local, so you looked up to him. He drove a sports car. He was quite tough looking. He was just, and he had a big personality, and you liked just being near him, right? And his son happened to be my best mate. And the fact that he encouraged you to support West Ham and would take us over to West Ham would just like captivate your imagination. Then we had these other mates around us, and all of their dads actually would take us, you know, if it was someone's birthday, would make the effort to take the group of us, the four of us, over to Upton Park. And those were my first experience being taken on like friends' birthdays by their dads. And all the dads got into it. And I just think it was amazing, actually. I look back and I think those dads, only one of them was actually a real West Ham fan. One of them was a Glaswegian Glasgow Rangers fan. But because his son, William, who was another one of our mates, got so into West Ham, he started taking us and he embraced West Ham. So there was a little group of us. And because it seemed so incongruous that we were at school in West London in the 80s and we supported West Ham, made us more of a gang. And it bonded us more. And we all went on secondary school together where it got even more intense. And we went to a school that's full of Chelsea fans, right? And we were even more of a gang then because it makes you even more defiant and determined, you know? And we all used to go together. We used to, like, you know, once we were at secondary school, we'd be finishing school on a Wednesday and jumping on a tube for about 30 stops on the district line all the way across London in our school uniform to go and watch West Ham when we were like 13 on a Wednesday night. And it's a real bonding experience, you know.
It is, it's a long old trail. I mean, I used to work in Ealing, so if I had to do an evening game, obviously I live in Essex, so I was literally one side of the centre. So I know that district line from Ealing Broadway all the way to Upton Park was a nightmare.
It's not easy. You need commitment.
You need commitment and a good.
We always used to say there's on the way home when you got older and you'd been in like the Duke of Edinburgh or the Queen's before getting on the tube, and you'd had a fair few pints of lager, we'd always say it was Tower Hill was the point at which you could bear it no longer, right? It was called like the Tower Hill danger zone or something, because that was where people would always think, that's it, I'm done, I'm getting off, I'm going for a slash, you know.
Oh, I love it. It's so true. It's so true. Right, that's great. Right, Sam, obviously, as what we're doing as well is we're talking about your Hammers 11. So all different people are giving their 11s, and it could be, I mean, we try and keep it to a 4-4-2. The only real caveat is you have to be alive to have seen them play. So obviously you and me, we couldn't put Bobby Moore in, but we could put in Javier Margas. Spoiler.
How did you guess? First name on my list.
First name on the team sheet. The claret haired dyed Javier Margas. But obviously it's your 11s. You can talk about whoever the hell you want to talk about. You might want to talk about your best players or your favourite players or your shittest players. It really doesn't matter, and that's what's really nice. Someone's made an impression on you, and obviously, you know, the whole thing around Tony Cottee and stuff, that made an impression on you. So there'd be players who've done the same with you. So in terms of your team, Sam, who would go between the sticks for the Sam 11?
Well, it's got to be Ludo for me. I mean, you know, it would have been a toss-up between him and Phil Parkes. Phil Parkes was a big hero. I played in goal a lot when I was a kid, and I loved it, and I obsessed over goalkeepers. And Phil Parkes, when I was a kid, was like a real hero. But then the reason Ludo wins out is during the era in which I started going all the time, like, you know, had a season ticket and was there with my mates all the time. He came into the team, and you know, he was just such a massive cult hero. He was an incredible goalkeeper. Parkes, towards the end of me seeing him, towards the end of his career, was very often injured, and sometimes that meant he didn't play, or sometimes meant he did play but was not the keeper he'd once been. Ludo, at his greatest, a signing by Lou Macari, who, you know, comes in for a lot of stick, but I think he signed some players who kind of went on to become legends this year. So in his very brief stint in charge, he made a huge impact on the club. And one of the biggest things he did was sign this unknown giant Czech keeper, who I just loved. And obviously there's key performances I remember being at, like the famous Manchester United game the last day of the season. But really, Ludo had been playing like that from day one. I mean, he was absolutely sensational bloke.
Yeah.
And I love him. And he kind of seemed to be there for so long as well. I think he must have joined maybe 1990 and then, did most of that decade, didn't he?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's got to be Ludo.
Yeah. Sure, and a lovely guy as well off the pitch, by the sounds of the stories that have been coming through already. Loopy Ludo, as my granddad used to call him. We'll put him in. There's only 3 players. My granddad, God rest his soul, would always talk about Loopy Ludo. He always called him Loopy Ludo, just because he was like a different keeper to probably Phil Parks. He was quite athletic, wasn't he? Ludo he was quite, where Phil Parks.
Yeah, because Parks looked like a big monster.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
That's I think, he was like part of the trend in the 70s and early 80s of footballers who looked like monsters from comic books. There was loads of them. John Walk's a classic of the same genre. Steve Agridjevic. Phil Parks looked like a big monster who'd come out of the woods, right? So powerful and fierce, but not like nimble. I mean, you see keepers nowadays, they're a disgrace by comparison. You get slips of like callow youths between the sticks, don't you? Not like your Parksies, but Mick Glasgow was the perfect in between.
Yeah,
he wasn't
hybrid.
Quite a big lumbering unit like your Phil Parksies of this world, but he's not like De Gea, who's
he wouldn't get knocked off a ball. No, exactly. He wouldn't get knocked off a ball for a challenge. But yeah, we'll put Ludo in. Lovely shouts. Let's go left back, Sam. Who have we got left back?
Well, I mean, I'll be surprised if anyone's gone, or very many people have gone for anyone other than Julian Dix. I have to go for him. I was tempted by George Paris because George Paris was, I think a very underrated player. People often sort of suggested he was like a bit of a weak link in that 86 team. But I've been, as everyone has been, I've been watching a lot of old games back on Facebook, thanks to
Robert Banks,
our fellow hammer, Rob Banks, right? And I keep thinking, bloody hell, George Paris was some player, right?
Yeah.
Plus, he was a great guy. Plus, there was a great chant about him. I bumped into him once on a train on the way to Brighton and just went over and bothered him. I was a student at the time. I just bothered him for a whole train journey, and he was very good about it. So I've always felt. But I cannot not say Julian Dix. Julian Dix is my all-time favourite West Ham player, simply because I've never seen a player who cared even more than the fans. People say, I love a player. I love a player who looks like he cares as much as the fans. I used to look at him and think, Jesus Christ, that bloke cares more than I do.
Yeah.
But what a player, and what a gifted player as well.
Indeed,
aside from all the madness and the aggression and the strength and the leadership, a really gifted footballer, massively underrated. Should have played several times for England. I personally think he's every bit as good as Stuart Pearce, if not better. But obviously his face didn't fit. But I absolutely love Julian Dix. I mean, I can remember all the goals, the penalties that always looked like, had the net not been there, the ball would have carried on and on forever and hit the sun. Do you know what I mean? Because they were just the very definition of that commentator phrase, rising all the time.
Yeah.
They were unstoppable. Unstoppable penalties, right? There was no point the keeper even standing there. But in terms of the mad stuff, my favourite memory and one of my favourite ever games that I remember was, I think in 91, was it? Or maybe it was earlier, I don't know, but it was Wimbledon in the Cup. It's quite a famous midweek Cup game. I think it was maybe a quarter-final against Wimbledon, the Crazy Gang. Extremely fiery tempered, lots of aggro all the way through. I think Eric Young absolutely poleaxes young Stuart Slater. There's a big fight. All the players get involved, 22-man brawl. I was standing on the North Bank in my school uniform Wednesday night. The atmosphere was brilliant. I remember saying to my mate, it was around the rave era. And I was going, this has got to be better than any rave you could go to. I remember saying, this has got to be better than being on ecstasy, right? Because it just felt so mad. It just felt so mad and electric, right? Yeah. And so everyone was going mad and surging forward and doing all that shouting West Ham aggro that they used to when the players fought. And then the game restarted, and I knew Julian was not going to leave it there. And, anyone will remember this moment if they were there. It's like the game restarts, the ball falls to Dennis Wise, who, of course, had been right in the middle of all of this aggro, winding everyone up. And as soon as Wise receives the ball, Dix just runs from miles away and goes straight through him. I think he knocked him clean off the pitch. And then my memory is he just got up and walked off. He didn't wait to see the red. He just said, it was all a case of bye. See you later, lads. And as it happens, we won the game anyway. Martin Allen scored a late winner. And so it was one of my greatest memories, thanks in part to Julian Dix's insanity.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, that's the thing about Dixie. I mean, particularly his second spell, he looked less like a football player, didn't he? He walked here, he had a shaven head, he ripped his
bloke from the pub.
He used to rip his shirt open. I love that when he when they had the hoop collar. He had these socks around his ankles, wouldn't he? And but he was just like, he was a brilliant player. There's when I've talked about Julian on the channel before, there's not many defenders, let alone fullbacks, who have that impact on a game and a crowd. I can't think of any, just because as you said, a thumping tackle or one of his penalties, he was just galvanised the crowd.
But sometimes he would just take a game by the scruff of the neck in the way that people used to see Steven Gerrard doing it for Liverpool, or Brian Robson would sometimes do it for United, where even if the rest of the team were playing badly, they'd just be like, I'm gonna do this on my own, right? I'm gonna get the ball, I'm gonna win the ball, I'm gonna drive the whole team forward, I'm gonna score the goal, I'm gonna do all the tackling, I'm gonna do the lot. And there's not many players do that. And when they do it, it is almost always someone in that central midfield leader role, like a Brian Robson or a Steven Gerrard. But I saw Julian Dix do that in, let's be honest, pretty poor West Ham teams, numerous times, too many times to count. He couldn't do it every game. Who could? But there were so many games during that era, during the 90s, where Dixie would just pick up the ball when we were playing lackluster. He'd just pick up the ball from a left-back position and drive all the way forward, very often scoring or creating a goal solo from left-back. I don't think there's anyone like that.
No, I can't think of anyone for sure. Right, Julian's nailed in. Okay, let's go with right back, Sam. Who should we have on the other side?
Right back, I'll say Tim Breaker, because I think if I look back over the years, he's never like a huge kind of, he's not the sexiest of players, so to speak. People aren't going to go and talk about him like they do about Julian Dix, and there aren't perhaps as many moments. And I think I didn't appreciate him as much at the time, but I think right back's always been a tricky position for West Ham, almost ever since those days. I can't think of many who, there's been some decent ones. Zabaleta was good. Repka was good, but there was never, he filled that position for so long. And again, looking back over the Rob Banks archive, the amount of goals he created, the amount he attacked was fantastic. And during that era, when we had Dix on one flank and Breaker on the other, it was good old fashioned 4-4-2 with the fullbacks creating as many chances as wingers or midfielders. Exactly. And so I liked him. And I also remember being really excited when we signed him, because I was fairly young, and a lot of your knowledge of other players at other clubs came from your Panini sticker album. And Tim Breaker seemed like an unusual name for a footballer, right? And I'd always noticed him. I must have just had a load of spares of Tim Breaker. He must have been one of those ones that you always had a double of. I had this player from Luton Town called Tim Breaker with blonde curly hair and a strange name. And then I see on teletext where they signed Tim Breaker. It blew my mind. Yeah. Because he was a Panini sticker book hero. And then we bought him, and he turned out to be good. So I've got to go with him.
Yeah, that's great shit. And I'm the same with you. I didn't have I've had a newfound respect for Tim Breaker since watching Rob's stuff. Because again, it was like a name you would always see, but you wouldn't really associate it. But he came. He had we interviewed.
He used to make thundering runs forward. Yeah, really good thundering runs forward. And we've lacked a right back like that.
Oh yeah, we have for a long time. And I was talking to Kenny Brown, and he had Breaker on his team, and he said that exact reason. He was like the ultimate professional. He was so and I was like, really? But I went back and looked at it. I thought, and I give him a shout.
Kenny Brown was fine for the same position, really, wasn't he?
Exactly.
He played right back as well,
Yeah, and that's what he said. He was like, I wasn't going to get in over it when Tim was playing, to be honest. Right, okay, we'll put a Breaker on the right back. Let's go centre backs then, Sam. Who's your first centre back?
Well, Alvin's got to be one. Because obviously he was the captain for so long. When I first got very heavily into the team, that 85-86 season. He was our leader. He was the only West Ham player at the time who played for England regularly, which again, as a kid, I was so excited. It made such a big deal to you at the time if one of your lads got picked for England. Now, I think most of us are gutted if Declan gets picked for England, because part of us are just worried because of the Dean Ashton experience. We're always saying, oh, bloody hell, they'll go and get injured. No one likes England anymore. But when I was a kid, seeing Alvin Martin playing the 1986 World Cup finals in Mexico, among all those legends like, Lineker and Waddle and Hoddle and Robson, it was so thrilling. And he was a brilliant player, brilliant leader. To be honest, I think West Ham again have lacked anyone in the mould of Alvin Martin ever since then. That they're really accomplished, reliable. We've had some good centre backs, but the way in which he was just like always there, always our leader, always driving us forward. And then since then, I've been so lucky to have met him and worked with him at TalkSport, and got to know him quite well. And he's like genuinely one of the nicest blokes, footballer or otherwise, I've ever worked with. And everyone says that who's worked with Alvin. And so, the man is a legend, and he's definitely first choice centre back.
And he's like, it's a phrase I've coined. He's an adopted Cottee. He's like, from Liverpool. He was like, but he just got it, and still lives around the area, and and he's just brilliant.
Yeah, Mark Ward's similar. Both Scouse lads who are totally passionate about West Ham.
Yeah.
They are claret and blue through and through. It's not a phony kind of, I'll always have an affection for them because I play for them. They're West Ham.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? They're 100% West Ham. They're as much West Ham as anyone. And it's incredible to see that, the infectiousness of it.
No, exactly. It's a good shout. And who's having a partner in the middle then, Sam?
Well, it was a tough one again, but I'm going to go for Steve Potts, another legendary captain, one of the most underrated players of that era in British football, in my opinion. I thought that he was just an incredible defender. He reminded me of he actually reminded me quite a lot of great sort of Italian defenders or continental defenders like your Franco Baresi's, in that he was not big, he was not a monster, right? He was not big, but you look at Baresi, who was rated in the same era as the best defender in the world in that generation, and he was small and mobile and sort of relentless and scrappy, and then decent on the ball as well.
Yeah.
And that was Steve Potts. I mean, I just thought Steve Potts was such an understated individual that he was never made big headlines for us, even though he was quietly our captain for a long time. He pretty much succeeded Alvin when Alvin started to be injured quite a lot. And I just thought he was amazing. And I think he qualified to play for the USA.
Yeah.
But I don't know if he got any caps.
I think he did.
But I'm sure he would have qualified for England too. And my obsession in that time, again, I was very obsessed with West Ham players getting recognition from the England squad. And I was obsessed with why Steve Potts wasn't in the England squad. And you'd say that even now to a fan of any other club, and they'd laugh. Because I go, Steve Potts, it just seems like we've heard of him, he's a generic player. No, Steve Potts was a world-class defender, right? I'd watch him and I'd think, he's the next Bobby Moore. I remember Bobby Moore on UK Gold, not saying he's the next me, but heaping him with praise. Because he was that kind of sophisticated defender. He didn't need to be big and brutish. He was like he was like, he was just glue himself to a rival defender. He was much better at centre-back than right-back. He started out playing at right-back, and I didn't think he was so good in that position. I actually saw him get mullered a couple of times in that position, like by Ginola in particular. But at centre-back, absolutely great. Absolutely brilliant, elegant, scrappy, but composed on the ball. I love Steve Potts.
And a lovely haircut.
Yeah, great haircut too.
It's never a hair out of place. Right, put Potts in. Great shout. Okay, that's your back four done. You got your goalkeeper. Let's go into midfield. Let's go left back, Sam. Left wing rather. Who we got on left wing?
Left wing, it's got to be Dimitri Payet.
Yeah.
Dimitri Payet is you could put him really anywhere in a midfield or attack, but I'll put him left wing. You got to make special mention of Alan Devonshire, who obviously was a big part of the team when I first was going.
Yeah, sure.
And, a lot of people say, and the players of that Boys of 86 team will all say he was by far the most talented player in the team. Yeah. And he was great. But for me, Dimitri Payet is the most talented and skillful player I've ever seen at West Ham. It's quite a big thing to say, and we'll get on to talking about Canio and and Joe Cole, and there's so many skillful players you can talk about. But Payet, for that one season, for me, he was the form player in the world.
Yeah.
If you look at his performances, and what I can't get my head around is the fact that, first of all, he came to us. He'd had a season at Marseille where he'd got more assists than any other player in Europe, including Messi and Ronaldo, right? So, in all honesty, when he signs for us and you hear that stat, you think there must be a deep flaw in this guy because, all due respect, but, with those stats, why is he signing for us? And he was oldish. He was 26 or whatever. And you think, why isn't he at a top Champions League side? So I thought, there's got to be a catch here. And then I also thought, as you do about all foreign players, really, especially those foreign, attacking flair players, you look at some of the greats, the likes of Perez and Henry at Arsenal. Yeah. They've taken a year to settle in, right?
Yeah.
They take time. Dimitri Payet, from his first game in the Premier League, was that 1-0 away win or was it 1-0? No, it was more than 1-0, wasn't it? But the away win at Arsenal.
Yeah.
When Reece Oxford played, right? And he was unreal in that game. People didn't notice because they were talking more about Reece Oxford the next day. But he walked in like he'd been playing. He just walked into the Premier League from, let's be honest, the weaker league, right? The French league. He walked in, looked around, and he just started taking a piss from day one.
Yeah,
he didn't think, I'll see it. He was taking a piss from day one. He was having the piss out of world-class players. He was nutmegging people and doing every trick in the book. He was playing like Ronaldinho. But from the first day to the last day of the season, notwithstanding an injury, which even that he bounced back from in record time.
Yeah.
I thought, this is ridiculous. When we went into the Euros that summer, I bought my kids France Payet shirts with Payet on the back because England's squad was basically the Spurs team. I couldn't bring myself to get behind them, right? I was like, England, I'm not bothered. I'm not supporting all these Spurs players. I'm supporting bloody France. And France should have won it as well. Yeah. And he scored on their first game. He scored a world-class goal. I just thought every time this player gets the ball, he scores a world-class goal. How has he got to this age not being more famous?
Yeah.
Right? Than he should have been. I still don't understand. And then, as I understand it, he went to Marseille and just went back to being what people sort of expected of him, which is one of those sort of players who has flashes of genius.
An enigma player,
but the rest of the time is a bit of a passenger. That wasn't what he was like that season for West Ham. He was a 9 out of 10, sometimes 10 out of 10, every time he played.
Yeah.
Unbelievable player.
He was.
I mean, you can tell, I just get excited thinking about the bloke. And I know he ended on bad terms. I don't care.
No,
I don't care about that. He gave me more joy in my early 40s, I suppose it was. He delivered more joy. I thought that level of footballing joy was a thing of the past. It was confined to my childhood and adolescence.
Yeah.
I'd never feel that way again about watching a West Ham player, but he proved me wrong.
Yeah, no, exactly. He was an amazing player. And as you said, there was, anywhere like 20, 30 yards out, free kick, we're going to score it. When was that? I don't remember that. Probably maybe Julian, maybe because he'd have a shot, maybe. But it's like it's like
maybe Julian,
or Tony Gale do a few free kicks, whatever. No, but
with Payet, you'd think it's at the least it's going to be on target.
Yeah,
right? At least it's going to be on target. Now, I mean, we hadn't had a player like that for years either. You always saw players taking free kicks you didn't think were really free kick takers, but they were the ones sort of, give it a go. We didn't have a specialist. No. I mean, Noble used to take a lot of them, but we hadn't had a specialist in many a year. And then, I remember that season I saw him score a lot, but I was at Old Trafford behind the goal.
Yeah.
In the upper tier behind the goal when he scored that incredible free kick from what still feels like, when I picture it in my mind, like 50 yards out. I'm sure it's like 30, but in my mind it was 50. I mean, it just seems so far out. You just think there is no way. There is no way he's going to do it. It's a bit like Gaza in that semi-final against Arsenal those years ago. You think he's not really going to try one.
From there, yeah.
Absolutely unbelievable. And we were surrounded by United fans who were livid. It was one of those situations where they'd fucked up the ticketing, and there was a group of us all sitting in one, West Ham fans all sitting in one sort of supposedly neutral area, and we all stood up at one. I mean, even if you'd planned not to, it was one of those games that was so sensational. You lost control over your own body and mind.
That's not bad for a football player to do that for you. No, Dimmy, best player I've ever seen. No, I totally agree with that. Right, let's go the other wing then, Sam. Let's go to the right wing. Who have we got on the right wing?
I'm going Trevor Sinclair. I love Trevor Sinclair. Special mention to Mark Ward, who's another guy who I've become friends with over the years, and was brilliant when I was a kid. I loved watching Mark Ward play, and he's a top bloke. But if I'm honest about my own, I've based most of this not always on an objective who was the best player, but I think in the spirit of what you're doing on your channel, I've tried to think of it in terms of what players had the biggest emotional impact on me. And in terms of the amount of games I saw him playing and the amount of memories that he gave me when I was there at Upton Park in the flesh, Trevor Sinclair, during that Harry Redknapp era in particular, where he often was playing almost like right wing back. Because Harry liked to play 3-5-2, but with wingers rather than fullbacks out wide, sort of thing, because that's Harry. And Sinclair was amazing at that job. He was absolutely incredible. And when we signed him, it was one of those great Redknapp signings where people thought that he was on the way down in his career because he'd had a great spell at QPR. He'd scored that famous overhead kick for them. But by the time we signed him, we got him on the cheap. They'd been relegated, and people said that he was overweight and his arse was too fat. That was the famous thing that people would say about Trevor Sinclair, and that he'd got a bit slow. And that was why Redknapp stole in and thought, actually, I think that's bollocks. I think Trevor Sinclair is a brilliant player. He just needs a little bit of a, kick up the arse or whatever. And I think I remember him scoring 2 goals against Everton at Upton Park. And I think that was his debut.
I think so, yeah.
I'll have to go back and double check.
Yeah.
But he scored 2. I think it was a 2-2 draw. And I remember because I was so excited because I'd loved him at QPR. So I was so excited we'd signed him. He straight away, again, he hit the ground running. He didn't take time. It was like just the transfer alone was enough to sort of almost reset him, to his factory settings sort of thing. Yeah. And I remember I sat there, I had a cup. I remember holding a cup of tea. And there was a lad who I didn't really know sitting next to me. And when the goal went in, I think a corner came in and Sinclair ran into the box late and headed it in. And the lad next to me punched the air. And as he did so, he knocked this boiling hot cup of tea at point blank range into my face. And obviously that was a very memorable experience. And I just always think of that moment. When I think of Trevor Sinclair, I think of his debut at the club and a cup of tea exploding all over my face, but me kind of cheering through it because I was so excited.
Enamored, no, he was
an amazing player. And the other big memory was again going to England when he came on for England against Argentina in the 2002 World Cup. And he'd been a very, very late call-up because I think Danny Murphy had got injured. And he came out there and he'd only arrived the day before, so he must have been jet-lagged. And he came on and he played. I remember watching that in a packed pub somewhere in London. And he came on and I was going mad. Just, you celebrate when a West Ham player comes on, don't you? Especially when you're in a pub with England fans who support other teams. Yeah. And you kind of want them to know nothing actually matters to you as much as West Ham. Like, I don't care about England. I just want that bloke to play well. And he played absolutely brilliantly. Another very underrated player who was unlucky to be in his position in the same era as David Beckham.
Yeah, exactly. I think they then play most of those games at left wing, didn't they? I think.
They used to play him on the left, which was a tricky position for England at the time. So I guess that's how he got a bit of a run in the side during that World Cup. But he was good in all those games. Yeah, he was.
And the second player my granddad would remember, he was blind. He's getting a bit. His eyesight was going. Despite the fact he drove everywhere. Yeah. Any black player for West Ham was Trevor Sinclair, who did something good. He's like,
they were always Trevor Sinclair.
Bloody Sinclair. Sinclair, yeah. Lovely shout. Okay, let's go midfield, Sam. Who's your first midfielder?
Nobes has got to be the first choice. I love Mark Noble. A proper link, I think, to old West Ham.
Yes.
In as much as he's from the area, he's been at the club his whole life. He's a real throwback player. He even looks like, I don't know what it is about him.
I know exactly.
I can sort of see him in the the 1981 shirt coming out against Liverpool in the League Cup final or something. He's just like he's always been there. I think he's really gifted. I get a bit sad when over the years people periodically write him off. It seems to have been going on for ages, but then he'll always turn in. Every season there'll be a handful of like really breathtaking, real captain performances.
Yes,
an amazing all-round player, fits into a grand tradition of West Ham midfielders who are all action. Like, and we're going to get onto that with my next choice, but the sort of player who could do the lot, you know, not like the tradition was you'd have a Billy Bonds next to a Trevor Brooking. And that in the days of 4-4-2, all clubs had your hard man and your passer, right?
Yeah.
And like, you know, so Spurs would have, I don't know, they'd have Steve Perryman next to Glenn Hoddle or whatever. But West Ham, I think over the years have had really great all action midfielders who do the lot. You know, they'll tackle, they'll run, they'll scrap, but then also they'll score the odd worldie, or they'll pick out Michel Platini like passes, you know. and I genuinely think Noble at his best was right up there amongst the best of them. So I love him for emotional reasons, because he's been there through so many different teams, so many different eras. We might not see another player like Mark Noble ever again. But I also love him because, you know, I think he's a genuinely talented footballer, really talented footballer. I mean, you know, the amount of games he's played in the Premier League outdoes most players, not just West Ham players, but most players.
Exactly. And I think with Nobes, I mean, he's part of that dying breed, unfortunately, that, not just the one-man clubs, but the people who stay around for a long time. You know what I mean? If you get 3 years out of a player now, you've done well. And like him, you know, it was the Tony Gale interview. He was talking about, you know, his testimonial. And I think in his time, he had like 11 testimonials, like years, like literally one after each other. Him and Jeff Pike.
Yeah.
No, that the testimonial itself as a concept is so rare
really
now.
Exist.
Noble. I can think of Vincent Kompany had one. Carragher had one.
I mean, what will be the next West Ham one? I can't think of anyone who'd be close.
Cresswell, maybe. I mean, he's been around no way 10 years yet, but obviously Ginger Pele was like 9, kind of. But it doesn't happen very often now.
You know, let's hope Declan Rice makes it. But to be honest, I can't see it happening. I can't see Declan Rice being at West Ham.
That's another issue. That's another issue when West Ham players play for England or play well at European. You're like, shit. You're not telling you get injured, but shit.
Maybe if Nobes had got the England recognition that we all think he should have done, maybe he wouldn't have been around. But something tells me he would have been, because he's proper West Ham, isn't he? I mean, you know,
it's true.
And I think he absolutely loves the club, and the chance of us getting another player like that, like even if Declan stays, I'm sure Declan Rice loves West Ham, feels a lot of affection towards the fans and everything, and I think he's great. But you know, at the end of the day, he grew up a Chelsea fan, and we got him from Chelsea. Yeah. So there's part of his heart, understandably, is going to belong to them. Yeah. But to have a Mark, even Billy Bonds came from Charlton Athletic.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, Mark Noble, you know, he's there with like Trevor Brooking and Bobby Moore as proper local lads, you know.
Yeah. No, exactly. And I think when he does retire, he'll be on the coaching staff, or
I hope so. I'd love to see him manager the club. I'd love to. I think West Ham more than ever now need things like that. We've mucked up a lot in the past. You know, not enough really is said about the way in which we neglected Bobby Moore. You know, Trevor Brooking, of course, is a big part of the club, and that's fantastic. But Noble needs to be, because now, with the way all of us fans feel about the move to the London Stadium, the change in so much stuff, whether it be the badge, the atmosphere around the club. Yeah, you know, it's very important for West Ham fans. I mean, I'm sure it's the case for all fans of all clubs, but we're so kind of obsessed with history and a sense of family at West Ham. I think, you know, these owners who often make the wrong decision, right, need to understand that Mark Noble needs to stay at the club in a significant role forever.
Yeah. And I don't think Mark will allow that any other way. You know, he'll be like,
yeah.
they'll be kicking and screaming him, dragging him out if that happened. But no, exactly. Yeah, Nobes is Mr. I mean, he's my Billy Bonds really, and because I was around with Billy, and you know, as you said, he's a one man club and a great guy. Right? Who's Mark going to partner in the middle then?
I'm going to stick him next to Ian Bishop.
Oh.
This was the toughest position for me to choose, probably, because there's so many central midfielders, and you think of the ones who were particular. Like Scott Parker was one who I think, again, because of the circumstance in which he left, because he went to Spurs. But I mean, Jesus Christ, Scott Parker for about 3 or 4 seasons was unbelievable. Another player, like we said about Julian Dix, who would take the game on his own.
Yes,
he played in some pretty shitty West Ham teams, right? But rather than let it get him down, he would just take the game, he'd take it on himself and just score goals and set up goals and make every tackle. And he was like, but anyway, let's not get into that. I didn't choose him because maybe it was the Tottenham move. I don't know. But however brilliant I remember him being, there's not that same emotional connection. But when I think of Ian Bishop, and the team that got promoted in the early 90s that had Bishop and Dix and Stuart Slater and Martin Allen, who was also very close to me choosing in this position. I loved Ian Bishop. He was such a classy player. He was a proper old school playmaker. He stroked the ball around the pitch, made things happen. But on top of that, again, like I said earlier, he's up there with Martin Allen, John Moncur, Ian Bishop. These are 3, and Mark Noble later. These are players who kind of did the lot. They'd get stuck in. They'd throw challenges in that got the whole crowd off their seat cheering, right? But then they were capable of unbelievable, breathtaking skills as well, you know. But Ian Bishop, I struggled between him, Martin Allen, and John Moncur. I went for Bishop because it was a great era for West Ham. The early 90s. Bishop lasted much later and carried on playing, you know, in a later era as well. But I just loved him, and I loved his unfashionable 1970s hairstyle. That he used to lash players with as he turned on the ball, which was always great. I think it was the brilliant fanzine Fortunes Always Hiding that did that used to do a cartoon in which it often said, you know, Bishop turns lashing the opposition player defender with his unfashionable 70s hairstyle, right? But he really did. He'd turn the ball, do like a Cruyff turn, look one way, turn the other, and the hair got so long and out of control, it would whip the other player, the defender, in the face and disorientate them momentarily, which was a great thing. I loved Ian Bishop. He was another one I thought should have played for England.
Bish is a great shout. He randomly, you know, like they don't really do it very often now, but you know, like kids programs, they used to do like the pranks where, you know, I know, no evidence, or someone would turn up at the school and it would be like, you know, and gun someone or something like that. He did it at my school, like my brother. It was with, do you remember Dave Benson Phillips?
Yeah, of course I do. He's a legend, entertainment legend.
Yeah, so it was him. It was some school. I don't know how they got hold of my brother's thing, but they came to the school and they did a prank and they got the video of the classroom.
Well, they did a prank on all of you.
No, on my brother. So they
on your brother because
he dived in.
Ian Bishop was his hero.
Yeah, he dived in. I don't think Bishop actually was officially his hero, but it was the one.
But that's who they could get.
Yeah. Although John, they only lived around the road. But yeah, so Bishop like piled in, and I always had that lasting memory of him. He's a lovely guy, and he's still, you know, like has any time for anyone, you know, and that's what I love about that.
Another Scouser, isn't he? That's another adopted West Ham Scouser. It's a weird long tradition that there's some sort of connection.
There must be
between
Scousers
and West Ham.
The Dockers and you know, and
maybe it's that.
Yeah, maybe, but
you can see parallels between sort of East End culture, I suppose, and Scouse culture in a way. And you know, because Cresswell's another one, isn't he?
Yeah. And Bish is great. He'll be on the channel soon. We get him on the channel soon, so it's good. But yeah, no, I love Ian Bishop, and I love the fact that you know he lives in America and he just like still has this massive scouse. But he's got these tattoos and he looks like a rocker.
Where does he live? Where does he live in America? Like Florida or something?
Something like that. Yeah. But he's got. He's what I love about that generation, as you said, the Martin Allens, John Moncurs, Ian Bishops, Trevor Morley's. They were just characters, weren't they? And you'd hear the stories of, and obviously that was even before social media, of John Moncur, cutting everyone's trousers off and painting his hair white.
They're just a bunch of lads. Yeah. They're a bunch of lads that everyone on the terraces related to.
Exactly, yeah.
And even the way they played transmitted that. Yeah. Because Upton Park was at its best when there was a bit of fizz and fire in the stands.
Yeah.
And when it got like that, then we could often be the extra... we could be the difference between a point and 3 points, right? And we've seen that happen sometimes against, the real giants. And I think it was players like that. They knew it, and they knew how to almost manipulate us and whip us into that sort of frenzy, right? Yeah. In a way that, I don't want to sound xenophobic or anything. This isn't that, but I just think that Felipe Anderson.
I think it's professionalism. I think
or Sebastian Haller, they're never going to understand that side of West Ham. No. And I'm not even blaming them. Why should they? No. They've come from a completely different country. They may have grown up barely knowing about West Ham. Why would they? We're not one of the most famous clubs abroad. Not really, right? And they don't know what it was like at Upton Park either. No. But Ian Bishop or John Moncur or any of those other players you mentioned, they would know that if there was a 50-50 ball and the performance had been a bit flat and the atmosphere in the stadium was a bit flat, it might even be worth them getting a yellow card because they knew that everyone would get up and it would basically motivate the whole stadium into action, which in turn would feed back to the team. And then it'd start going round in a circle. And that is how it worked at West Ham. And those players seem to be conductors of it. We needed players like that who just were in tune with the crowd,
Exactly. John Moncur would always get the first yellow card. Even if he was on the bench, I remember him pulling down the shorts of a linesman when he was a sub, and he was stuff you can't get away with that now. It was absolutely brilliant. But as you said, absolutely madman. But I think it's almost like a professionalism. Not they weren't professional. It's not saying they weren't professionals there, but sport is now at this uber level of professionalism. So it's almost like they can't show any personality. Do you know what I mean? It's all about the performance. It's all about their condition.
Yeah, it's like when you see it's like tennis players, isn't it? You see tennis players who've always been quite dull because they're machines, right? And I think ultimately, at an elite level, you have to leave everything else to the side. And your personality and everything else is not relevant. You just are you're a performance machine. And that's how it is in elite sport now. But back then it wasn't elite. So perhaps the actual technique we saw wasn't ever as good, but the fun was much better.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think you're right. I think with, and also you're saying about, people like Alvin Martin and this leadership, that's another trait I think you don't see very often. Occasionally you'll get a player who's, John Terry was probably the last leading player, that England had, but you don't get that level of sort of leadership, and it's a very unusual trait that comes through. But anyway, who should we go up front then, Sam? Who's your first striker?
So let's start with Paolo Di Canio.
Yeah.
Obviously, what can be said about him hasn't been said. He was another player that I used to say, he cared more than the fans. I've reviewed that now a bit. I watched back some old games with Paolo, and he didn't half play for himself. Do you know what I mean? He did play for himself. It was all about him, right? So he was flawed in many ways. I used to think the passion and the shouting and the screaming and the going mad at the ref or walking off the pitch, I thought, that's because he cares so much about West Ham.
Yeah.
But part of me thinks, no, he cared about Paolo Di Canio. And if things weren't going right for him, then he would get furious, sort of thing.
Yeah.
That said, I do think he had an amazing connection with the fans.
Yeah.
We loved him. He loved us. I met him as well on TalkSport, and it's one of my most prized ever photos. Sure. I've never been shy. I've never been cool about having a photo taken with a hero or a celebrity. Never been one of those guys who thought, it's a bit uncool. It makes me look a bit of a fanboy, and I'm working with them, so I want to act like, fuck that. I'm just like, let's get a photo, mate. I love you. And so I did that with Di Canio. I got on well with him. But I've lost count of the amount of golden moments. Yeah. Unfortunately, I wasn't there that day for the legendary goal against Wimbledon.
Oh, funny.
Which is a real shame because I used to go to all the games in that era, and I can't even remember the excuse because I wasn't abroad. I remember hearing it on the radio and saying, "Oh, we've just seen the best goal ever," and thinking, "Oh shit, why didn't I go?"
Yeah.
So I have to admit to that. But I was, if I have to pick probably a greatest moment, it was at Stamford Bridge, maybe in about 2003, possibly 2004, and I think Zola had scored a goal for them. We beat Chelsea at Stamford Bridge. Zola had scored a worldie for Chelsea, and Di Canio sort of looked at it, and it was a case of hold my beer, because he thought, all right, you've got a good Italian, but I'm going to show you how to do it better. And he did that goal where he sort of juggled the ball and then volleyed it in. And to be at Stamford, winning at Stamford Bridge is one of the best feelings you can have.
Yeah,
it's one of the best feelings. When West Ham turn up at Stamford Bridge, it's always really good fun.
Yeah.
Whether we win or lose, as it happens, it sort of seems to be an away ground where West Ham fans really always have a great day out, right?
Yeah,
but if you've bloody beaten them as well, and you've won it with your star man scoring a world-class, like, piss-take of a goal, and that, to me, just encapsulates all the things that were wonderful about Paolo Di Canio.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think I can't remember. So let's come up in conversation before that Chelsea game, and I think Ranieri in the press conference afterwards basically said, "There's no point. Let's talk about Paolo Di Canio or something like that." You know, it was like it didn't take any because they'd lost. But no, we've had some funny stories about that goal, and people have missed it. I think Ian Dale was stuck in the Blackwall Tunnel when that guy. I think Benji Lanyardo, his dad, had his back to the game when they scored. It's really
no
funny.
one saw it.
No one fucking saw it.
So many people missed it. I'm people ask about that goal a lot. Go, oh yeah, you must remember. You must have been there. And sometimes I'm embarrassed to say no, because I think it wasn't even an era where I can say I wasn't getting to West Ham match. I was going to every game. And that day, I remember being with my girlfriend, like, out doing something that just wasn't important. So I can't remember what inspired me to not
also,
go.
It was like West Ham Wimbledon, it was like West Ham Wimbledon. It wasn't like a glam. So if you was looking at, you could probably miss that one, thinking, it might scrape a win, but
I have to say, I look at it, and it's not my favourite goal anyway of West Ham. There's other goals that to me had a bigger impact, but Trevor Sinclair's pass to me is actually not spoken about enough. I think that's the best bit of the goal.
Yeah,
I think that Di Canio, it's good. He jumps and does a scissors kick. It's a bit of a Di Canio flourish. I think he could have kicked it in another way and still scored, but he sort of did a little bit of fancy dannery. Fine. Yeah. But Trevor Sinclair's goal, pass, what a pass. Yeah. And people should talk about that just as much.
Yeah. And I think it was Freddie Canute's debut as well, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
So he got overshadowed. He was good. He played well. He played well. Okay, who's going to partner with Paolo up front?
Well, it's got to go back to pretty much my all-time hero, Tony Cottee.
Yeah.
Because, it's always your first love, isn't it? And I've had lots of different heroes. And if people ask me, I used to yell, Julian Dix is my favourite West Ham player. But Tony Cottee, when I first fell hook, line and sinker for West Ham, I already supported them. And, I loved people like Paul Allen and Trevor Brooking when I was a little boy. But when my first game was in 1984 against Newcastle. And Cottee played in that game. And on the way to the ground, that's what I was excited about. I just wanted to see Tony Cottee. I couldn't believe I was going to be in the same space as Tony Cottee, a guy who I'd seen pictures on the newspaper and I'd seen on TV, but I was actually going to be able to see him in the flesh.
Yeah.
It blew my mind. And I think as a kid, it just goes back to that thing. He seemed like a kid. He's this blonde-haired 17-year-old kid who's got the chance to play for the club he supports and then becomes their star striker. And I just loved it. And, so throughout primary school, I loved Tony Cottee. And then I remember at secondary school, I even had pictures, like, you have to cover your own books. Books with pictures of Tony Cottee. And when he left to Everton, I was sort of gutted, but at the same time, I was gutted as a West Ham fan, but I had such a connection with Tony Cottee. I was proud that Tony Cottee had gone on to a club who at the time were a big club, who were challenging for the title. And I think he became briefly the most expensive player in British football. Right. And then when he came back, which I always deep down knew he would, I was delighted again, and he was brilliant again. And so, Tony Cottee is just the guy who helped me fall in love with West Ham.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't score that many classics, really, did he? He was a
No.
right poacher, Tony Cottee.
Fox in the box,
but
yeah.
who cares? I mean,
exactly, and the impact
just a
he
great
made.
man.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And he's still like, he obviously loves the club, and and again, even obviously he was at Everton and Leicester, but you still know he's a West Ham boy, isn't it? And it's like, doesn't matter what happened, he was still West Ham boy. And that that frames up the team nice, because you've got like the poacher, you've got sort of the fox in the box, haven't you? So Paolo will be Paolo, he wouldn't necessarily be a target man or anything, but him and Payet,
him and Payet in the same team.
Oh.
I mean, it would be difficult for the opposition to handle, and I like to think that there'd be enough like steel in Bishop and Noble.
Yeah,
who could sit deep, spray the ball from the back, but be there as a nice shield in front of the defence. I reckon this team is interesting though. If you were to pick the best team, like the team that you would probably have considered a lot of those lads who came through Tony Carr's academy, like Frank and Rio and Joe Cole and Michael Carrick. And you'd also have thought more about having Alan Devonshire in there and stuff like that. But for me, I just 11. Preferred. This is my favourite 11.
Brilliant.
And I think I'll be turning it over again and again and again in my head forever. But I think I've done all right. I think I've chosen one that I can live with.
Thing. Yeah. And as I said, I mean, that's the thing. It's your 11. And that's the thing. These guys meant something to you. And clearly each one had an impact. And that's what what it's all about. For it is an entertainment game. And it's a sport, but we pay to get entertained. As you said, at West Ham fans, we don't necessarily like, well, as you say that, we might like a mid-table obscurity season.
Yeah.
But
on
there'll always be something.
There'll always be something.
Yeah, and so but as I think Tony Gale was saying, during his time, there was never a dull season. We might be mid-table that week, but we'd have a cup run, or we'd be teasing at relegation, and there's always something going on. That's what West Ham like. We like players where something's going on. You don't know what's going to happen. It could be a Payet turn. It could be a Di Canio strop.
Yeah, exactly. And there has been the odd season where we have accidentally fallen into a mid-table team, right? And I can live without them. I mean, to be honest, I look at the Kirbishley era. Kirbishley, good guy, but we, for a brief period, we had quite a lot of money, and we went out and bought some really big name players and really rolled the dice. But it got us as far as finishing mid-table. And that era, there were some great players like Craig Bellamy or what have you, but you just don't really remember it.
No.
The Redknapp years, some people don't like Harry Redknapp. I love them. That was my favourite period. The two periods that are probably happiest for me were most of Harry Redknapp's era and most of Alan Pardew's era. And I think both those managers had quite a lot in common in that they were big characters, and they sort of generated an atmosphere around the club of non-stop excitement and dreaming, and they weren't pragmatic. And you look at Pellegrini, I can see why the club hired him, but you just think he's not a West Ham sort of a bloke.
No,
he's understated. We don't want that.
No,
do you know what I mean? We don't want understated. We want an Alan Pardew, big time Charlie, rocking up in a bloody Ferrari or having a fight with Arsene Wenger. Yeah. Or Harry Redknapp just being bananas and making all these mad sign-ins and, always going at it against the bigger teams and thinking the most important thing, no matter what, even if we're in a relegation scrap and a point would be a great result, I want us to go out and try and beat them 3-0. Yeah. That's West Ham. That's the sort of manager we should always look for.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. As you said, it's that sort of passion on the side of the touchline, isn't it? We didn't really get that with Pellegrini, and I think with Moyes we get it with Nolan. You can see Nolan really has this.
Yeah,
and he's really seems to have galvanised.
It was a great appointment, Nolan, wasn't it? Yeah.
So I think he was probably he was one of our greatest in my lifetime as a captain. He was he embodied.
He was a superb captain. Yeah, really smart shrewd signing, really, wasn't it?
It was. Although, you know, come Christmas, you know, he'd get a yellow and be suspended over Christmas. But
I respect him for that as well.
Yeah,
mate.
no, I do as well.
Yeah.
I totally.
I want to be with my family at Christmas too, mate.
Yeah. Elbow done. Sam, it's been absolutely brilliant. A bit longer than our usual half hour, but I don't care. It's been great. I absolutely love chatting to you. And and obviously, thank you to everyone else for watching. Obviously, share, like, subscribe. You know what to do. And until next time, guys, stay safe and take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Cheers.